Good morning and welcome everybody. Great to have you here today for NSAI's Brexit webinar. And as I said, we're going to focus on the construction sector. My name is Deirdre Farrelly and I will moderate today's session. So we're joined this morning by our panelist, John Wickham. John is from the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage. We have our own Sean Bell from NSAI's Sustainability and Built Environment Division, Michael Smith from NSAI's Brexit Unit, and we also have with us Ray Ryan from Revenue. So thanks, gents, for being with us this morning. We're looking forward to hear all your pearls of wisdom. Now, I suppose as attendees, you're all acutely aware at this point that the end of the Brexit transition period on the 31st of December 2020, as we all know, has brought about major changes to the construction product certification and regulation area. And I suppose between now and 12:30, we're hoping to explore what those changes mean for all of you who are working in that sector. So just to give you a quick run through of how it's going to run today, we'll begin by hearing a few short presentations from our panelists. And then we will follow this with a Q&A. So if we can ask maybe, we're going to leave the questions until the end. You'll see there is a chat function there. So please feel free to type in your questions during the presentations. I'm sure a lot of you already have questions. And thank you to those who submitted questions as well beforehand. We're going to try and address those. So the Q&A will address, and we're going to discuss some of the areas, I suppose, that have been causing difficulty for all of you over the last 6 weeks or so since all these changes kicked in. And as I said, we do love to hear from you. So make sure you do type into the chat, and listen, we'll do our very best. We have a lot of people here this morning. We've over 400 now, I see, at the moment. So we will endeavour to do our best to answer these questions. But we are going to provide all the presentations from the speakers, and obviously the webinar will also be on demand afterwards, and I'll go into those details a little bit later. So let's get started. Why not? I think we're going to begin with John. So John, if I can ask you to share your screen there, and for myself and the other panelists, we'll turn off our cameras and mute ourselves.
Thanks very much and welcome everybody. On behalf of the department, I'm delighted to be able to collaborate with the NSAI Brexit unit on this important matter and be available to support industry in any way we can, as we all face the impacts that Brexit has brought with it. Just to recap on over the last year, the UK have left the EU on the 31st of January 2020 after both sides concluded a withdrawal agreement to facilitate that orderly departure. This included a protocol for Ireland and Northern Ireland, which protects the peace process, avoids a hard border on the island of Ireland, whilst preserving the integrity of the EU customs union, single market and Ireland's place therein. That transition period ended on the 31st of December 2020, and EU-UK negotiating teams have agreed in principle a trade and cooperation agreement which came into effect on the 1st of January. So that EU trade and cooperation agreement provides for a tariff-free, quota-free and sectoral cooperation in a number of important areas. But it's important to note that even with the trade and cooperation agreement in place at the end of the Brexit transition period, this brings substantial and lasting changes insofar as the UK is no longer part of the EU single market and customs union. This means that new procedures will apply to businesses moving goods to and from the UK, excluding Northern Ireland. The Protocol of Ireland, Northern Ireland, which forms part of the withdrawal agreement agreed between the EU and UK in 2019, means that no new procedures will apply to goods moving between Northern Ireland and the other member states of the European Union. So, just the focus of my presentation this morning will be just to remind everyone about the CPR, that nothing has changed from an EU perspective with how the CPR works. I wish to raise awareness amongst the economic operators, the manufacturers, importers, distributors, to continue to carry out risk assessment of their supply chain and satisfy themselves that the construction product supply continuity is resilient. I hope that we can ensure that construction products continue to be lawfully marketed on the market, that declarations of performance continue to be credible means to be relied upon when people choose such products for use in buildings and for compliance with building regulations. So mitigating any adverse impact on supply chains will in turn minimize any delay to construction. So I've just put up there how the CPR works, and you're all very familiar with it. I suppose it's underpinned by market surveillance and checks that ensure that products are placed on the EU market conform with the CPR. The main players in this from the perspective of having responsibilities under CPR, the department is the notifying authority. It designates notified bodies and technical assessment bodies. The notified bodies are accredited by the Irish National Accreditation Board, and the full list of notified bodies is available on the NANDO CPR database. It's important to note that since the end of the transition period, that UK designated bodies have been removed from that database. All of us here have a shared national interest to ensure compliance with the CPR and to ensure that the products placed on the market are in conformity with the applicable standards. And in preparation for the end of the Brexit transition period, we needed to have plans and processes in place to meet the challenges that would arise in the short and the long term. So in this respect, the Minister has appointed Dublin City Council as the market surveillance authority for construction products for the whole of the state. This is really important. We have a well-resourced single body that that has the ability to liaise with customs, that they will be able to get greater interaction between local authorities at local level, and to provide a national direction for the market surveillance of construction products. If you do have any queries on products that you feel that are non-compliant, the email there is support@nbco.gov.ie. So just to remind ourselves of the impacts of Brexit, one of the most important documents that still is of relevance is the EU Notice to Stakeholders of March 2020, and that reiterates the principles that from the point of view of harmonised union legislation such as the CPR, nothing particularly has changed. The EU regulations continue to apply. And I suppose what is important is that authorised representatives and importers must be established within the EU 27. And obviously the Northern Ireland Protocol facilitates importers and their authorised representatives to be established also in Northern Ireland. UK bodies have lost their status as EU notified bodies at the end of the Brexit transition period. They can no longer certify harmonised products under union legislation. And importantly as well, that the UK Accreditation Service will cease to be a national accreditation body within the meaning of the regulations associated with this. Consequently, certificates and reports issued by notified bodies accredited by UKCA are no longer recognised in the EU. The EU have the EA and UKCA have published a statement that, however, does recognise a continuity of their recognition of each other's competence outside of the sphere of harmonised legislation, and that's important for the fact that we will continue to rely on lab reports, that fire test reports, etc., that have been conducted by UKCA, and having that agreement in place provides for a peer status amongst the EA, and it'll be continually recognised that their competence is on an equal footing. Just this slide, I just want to differentiate between marketing and using. So the conditions the CPR concerns itself with placing the products on the market, it should be noted like that that does not necessarily mean that such products are fit for use for which they're intended when they're incorporated into construction works. That is a key decision that end users, builders, specifiers, designers will have to make. The sight of a CE marking on a product indicates that a declaration of performance exists. It's incumbent upon those that are using that product to review that declaration of performance and make sure that it's appropriate for their end use. Building regulations themselves would cover many more things beyond just the performance of the product. It'll cover the installation, the workmanship involved, etc. The department has published some FAQs and they go a long way to address some of the concerns that people may have about the EU notice to stakeholders. We've localized some of the questions so that they can be directly applicable to people, and also to cover aspects that we have commonly received in questions over the last number of weeks and months. There's about 15 or 20 questions within those FAQs. Some that reoccur again, and I'll just focus on one really, is like, what is the status of British standards within the referencing, within the references to technical guidance documents to building regulations. And I suppose just to clarify that the status of references to British standards in technical guidance documents continue to remain valid until such time as the technical guidance documents are reviewed and updated in the normal fashion. So other questions that we have received revolve around, well, what happens if construction products were placed on the market in the UK in December before the end of the transition period? Do they have to be recertified? And the answer to that is no. Once they have been placed on the market and the EU notice to stakeholders confirms this, that they can continue to make their way to the end user without recertification. And that's something that's mutually recognized between the UK and the EU. However, there is a burden of proof that for economic operators, and it does come down to good stock management, that they have in place evidence to support that the product had been made and the product had been placed on the market. Those are pretty much the two questions that we have been receiving. I've provided some hyperlinks there, and you can refer to them. I'm happy to take questions at the end of presentations. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, John. So Sean, thank you. I see you there. If you just share your screen, and the rest of us will mute and turn off our cameras. Thank you. Sean Balfe.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming along. I see we have well over 500 people here. I don't know if that's indicative of the level of interest in construction certification, or whether you just ran out of the Netflix portfolio and found your way here through misadventure. Anyway, my name is Sean Balfe. I work with NSAI in the area of construction product certification, and as I say, you're all very welcome this morning. I'm going to look at the current situation as regards certifying products for use here in Ireland and in the EU in general. We look at compliance with Irish building regulations, and then the changes that are going to take place over in the UK from the end of the year. Okay, so there's a lot of certification marks, and a lot of you will be familiar with some of these logos that I've shown here. And in the main, they are quality certification schemes. The only mark that's relevant here as regards placing products on the market in the EU is the CE mark. And that must be applied at the time the product is first placed on the market. So the point John was making about products that have been placed on the UK market in 2020, they would have required to be CE marked at that time, and they were legally placed on the EU market and continue to be a legal product and can be traded up until it's used by the end user. The CPR, as you know, is the primary legislation regarding construction product certification in Europe. It is 447 harmonized standards under the construction product regulation. And if any product that falls under those standards, it's mandatory that it's CE marked before it can be placed on the market. Implementation of the CPR is supported by a network of notified bodies and surveillance authorities. And other marks, such as the marks that I'm showing you here on the screen, are not a substitute for the CE mark. If it falls under a harmonized standard, it must be CE marked. Okay, each harmonized standard in the back of the harmonized standard, Annex ZA, has this AVCP system, attestation of verification of constancy of performance. So there's 5 levels here: 1+1, 2+3, and 4. And each product will be designated to fall under one of these particular levels, or a manufacturer could have an option in some standards to declare under one or more level. However, the notified bodies that I mentioned earlier have a part to play in everything from 1 down as far as 3, and under system 4, it's just the manufacturer that drafts the DOP and can place the CE mark on it themselves under system 4 only. But in other ones requires a notified body to certify the product. And as of the 31st of December last year, all UK notified bodies cannot perform this function anymore for the purpose of CE marking. So any products that had been tested under System 3 there is particularly one that caused a lot of angst. That would have been where a manufacturer would have had to get an initial type test of the product maybe a number of years ago when the CPR came into effect in the first place in 2013. May have got their product tested then for the purpose of AVCP 3. But if they did that with an UK notified body, they will have to get it retested with an EU 27 notified testing laboratory now to place it onto the market. The other ones, all UK notified bodies have lost their notification status for the purposes of CE marking. So as I mentioned, CE marking is a mandatory requirement when the product is being placed on the market. When it gets to the end user, their primary interest will possibly be to compliance with the Irish building regulations rather. And you can see here, this is part D of the regulations, materials and workmanship. So it states what are proper materials, and it includes a lot of materials here. It's important to note here, it doesn't exclude anything. So it's possible you could build your house with straw bales or tires packed with ram dirt or whatever. It doesn't exclude anything here. It's up to the design certifier to determine that the product is fit for the use for which it's intended and for the conditions in which it's to be used. That's important. We get asked a lot of questions about does CE mark infer compliance with building regulations. It doesn't, but it doesn't infer that it doesn't comply with them either. Also, there's 447 harmonized standards, as I said, under construction product regulation, but there's also a lot of products that don't fall under any of these standards. And if that's the case, they can't be CE marked. So there's some common materials that don't fall under the standards: reinforcing steel, ready-mix concrete, and compression fittings. But there are more. So it's not unusual if you're specifying products that you would come across a lot of products that are not CE marked. Okay, the situation in the UK is, as of now in 2021, CE marking is acceptable in the UK. You can place a product on the UK market if it's CE marked as we speak. But from the end of the year, that will all change, and the UK will move to a system where they require the UKCA mark. Now, in doing that, they're adopting the full suite of harmonized standards that were under the construction products regulation, and they're also adopting the process. So that any UK notified bodies that was formerly notified under the construction product regulation are now what they call approved bodies under the new UK regulation, and they will play their part in this AVCP system over there to assist manufacturers to place the UKCA mark on their product, so they can be legally sold in the UK from the 1st of January 2022. Just if there's any exporters in the audience, there's the 7 steps to UKCA marking, and these are essentially the same as you would be familiar with initially for CE marking the product, except there's one slight difference, the 7th step, which I will talk about. Identify the directives applicable to the product, verify the essential characteristics, determine if an approved body is required. Have the product tested, draft your declaration of performance, or I think they're actually calling it declaration of conformity. You affix the UKCA mark, and you need to appoint an authorised representative. Now, this didn't happen under for Irish manufacturers under the CE marking system, because you weren't, you were in the EU and you were your own authorised representative, if you like, or you assumed the functions of the authorised representative. But now, if you intend exporting to the UK, you will need to have a legal entity over there that's acting on your behalf as an authorised representative. And the purpose of this person is to keep the DOP and technical documents over there and assist the national surveillance authorities in the UK with any queries they'd have about the product, and cooperate with any request from the national authorities or any action taken to eliminate risks posed by that particular construction product. Okay, there's some questions we get asked. Are goods imported from the UK bearing the CE mark compliant? Well, I think John addressed that previously. They can be. Possibly is the answer. If they were CE marked, if they're legally placed on the market before the 31st of December, yes, they were compliant then and will continue to be compliant. The situation with Northern Ireland is Irish manufacturers can continue to export to Northern Ireland using the CE mark alone. It's not necessarily to get the product, any additional marks are going to the Northern Ireland for the foreseeable future. And then can NSAI offer UKCA certification? We're currently looking at the possibility of doing that. We're trying to quantify the demand for it. There's no Irish notified body, or approved body, if you like, that's carrying out this function. And in order to do it, we need to establish a legal entity over in the UK. But that's something we're investigating. And if there is a strong demand for it, I anticipate we will do it. So if I could ask any of you who feel that you might require the UKCA marking, maybe to contact the office here and let us know, because it'll add to our case. Okay, thank you. That's the end of the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Sean. If you just stop sharing your screen there. Okay, and we're going to move swiftly on with Michael, is from our Brexit unit. So Michael, you do the same, and we will, I see folks, there's a lot of questions, but we'll do our best to get through them. So Michael, take it away.
Welcome, my name is Michael Smith, and I've been working in the Brexit unit in NSAI for the last 2.5 years. My presentation today is going to concentrate on the trade aspects of the changes rather than the product certification, and provide you some information what you need to know importing and exporting goods between the EU and the UK. Firstly, what happened on the 1st of January this year? The transition period ended and the UK Trade and Cooperation Agreement came into effect. This means one thing to remember is that EU law remains unchanged and continues to apply to all products placed on the EU market. However, EU law no longer applies in the UK. The UK has become a third country under EU law, which means that what actually has changed is that the provisions under EU law for third countries now apply to the UK, whereas they didn't before. UK law applies in the Great Britain market, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, and the protocol on Northern Ireland came into effect. What hasn't changed? EU CPR still applies to all construction products from the UK placed on the EU market. In fact, it applies to all construction products placed on the EU market that it previously applied to. There's a simple thing you should remember, is that it's not where the product that's manufactured that is important, it is where it is placed on the market. So the rules of the country where you place the product on the market apply, not the country that it's manufactured in. So for this, they must be CE marked if required by CPR. The manufacturer must use a notified body if it's required by CPR, and it must have a valid EU declaration of performance. Self-certification by UK manufacturers allowed under System 4, and that can continue the same way as it's allowed to any manufacturer anywhere in the world. But the key thing is that the Irish building regulations continue to apply to products used in Irish construction projects. A little bit on the protocol in Northern Ireland. It says a protocol protects the Good Friday Agreement and North-South cooperation and the All-Ireland economy. It has applied since the 1st of January this year. It avoids a hard border on the island of Ireland and protects Ireland's place in the single market and the customs union. Most of the changes I'll be talking to applying to trade with Great Britain will not apply to trade with Northern Ireland. EU product legislation continues to apply in Northern Ireland, and goods moving between Northern Ireland and the EU, i.e. Ireland, will largely continue to do so as before. You should notice no real change when moving goods either from Ireland to Northern Ireland or vice versa. So a little bit on the new UK legal framework. The UK legal framework, as Sean said earlier, replaced EU legislation. It applies to products in Great Britain. That is England, Scotland, and Wales. It does not apply in Northern Ireland because of the protocol in Ireland, Northern Ireland. UK product legislation, as I said earlier, similar to EU product legislation. The UKCA mark replaces the CE mark. UK approved bodies replace EU notified bodies. UK designated standards replace harmonized standards, and the UK Declaration of Performance replaces the EU Declaration of Performance, and UK customers of EU manufacturers will become importers under UK law. The UK, as we said earlier, has said that UK product legislation has applied in Great Britain since the 1st of January, but they will continue to accept CE mark construction products until the 31st of December this year. So you still require an EU Declaration of Performance, EU Notified Body Certification where it applies, and they will need to be certified to harmonized standards. However, from the 1st of January 2022, the CE mark construction products will no longer be accepted on the Great Britain market. So what mark must you use in these islands? Well, in the EU, i.e. in Ireland, you can only use the CE mark for construction products. In Northern Ireland, the CE mark applies, though under the protocol, manufacturers also have the option of using the new CE UK and I mark. However, if you have a CE mark on your products, you do not need to use that new mark. In Great Britain, the UKCA mark will apply to construction products. For this year, you can continue to use the CE mark your products and place them on the Great Britain market. However, from the 1st of January next year, that will no longer be possible. So what changes have happened when you're importing products from Great Britain? Well, first thing is that you will become an importer under EU law and take on additional responsibilities set out under Article 13 of the CPR. So you need to find out what those additional responsibilities are. You need to engage with UK manufacturers of your products. You need to be able to get the information and assurances you need from those manufacturers. Under the law, when requested by Market Surveillance Authority, you need to be able to access their technical file and all of their declarations. So you need to talk to your suppliers about getting access to that. I said you need, and then, and I said before, as John said earlier, the National Building Control Office are now the Market Surveillance Authority here. And if they request a copy to see the technical file, you have to facilitate that access with your suppliers. And the final thing is that your details must be included on the packaging and product information leaflets. So wherever the manufacturer's information occurred before, yours will need to go there now as well. So for our economic operation importing from Great Britain, well, the manufacturer in Great Britain is still a manufacturer under EU legislation. However, the first person who imports a product into the EU becomes an importer under EU legislation. And then anyone they sell on to remain a distributor who have a lower level of requirements under EU law. What's different to buying products from Northern Ireland? Firstly, Northern Ireland will be treated as if it is a member of the EU single market. The current rules continue to apply, i.e. there was no change on the 1st of January this year. Products must be marked with the CE mark, obviously if they're placed on the market down here in Ireland. They must be certified by an EU notified body or a TAB if required under construction product regulation, and they must have an up-to-date and valid EU declaration of performance. and products marked with the new CE UKNI mark cannot be placed on the EU market. So make sure that they are not marked with that if you're buying products in the north to sell on here in the south or placed in the southern market. So what it does mean that because Northern Ireland continues to be part of the EU single market, the manufacturer in Northern Ireland is a manufacturer. However, the person in the EU who buys that product from them remains a distributor under EU law and doesn't take on any of the new functions that an importer has or any of the new requirements. And obviously anyone they sell on to is also a distributor, so no change there. A couple of other little things to be aware of that might catch you out. Firstly, wood packaging materials. ISP 15 is an international agreement under the auspices of the EU, which sets down standards for the treatment and marking of wood packaging materials. Now that's pallets, crates, spools, what they call dunnage, which is used in transporting ships, or things like sleds and runners that you may have that are made out of wood used for transporting materials. Regulation 2031/2016 sets out the EU legal basis for that and the minimum standards that must apply in the EU. Key thing for that regulation is that it treats the EU as a single country. Therefore, you don't need to have your marks on your wood packaging material if you're trading within the EU, only if it leaves the EU, which means that any imports from Great Britain or any exports there must meet the requirements of ISPM 15 since the 1st of January this year, whereas previously they didn't have to because they're part of the EU. It also applies to exports from here to Great Britain, so make sure you use properly treated and marked crates and other wood packaging material if you're exporting to Great Britain. However, it does not generally apply to packaging material or trade with Northern Ireland because it is being treated as part of the EU, apart from certain minor exemptions which the EU has put in place for internal trade within the EU. Finally, what can you do to reduce your chance of your goods being stopped in customs? Little things on logistics. Firstly, try to avoid groupage if at all possible. If it's only your materials on the load, you have control over all of the certification and you're not being delayed by a mistake by somebody else within that load. If not, look what else will be on the same load. Certain products are going to be stopped and searched and checked every time. So you want to try and avoid loads with food, with plants or plant materials, or with animal products, which will all be subject to inspection at the ports. Make sure your wood packaging material is compliant. If importing from other EU member states, try and use direct routes to the continent. As we've seen recently, there have been a lot of additional ferries being put onto the routes from Rosslare and Dublin and Cork going direct to the continent, and try and use those if at all possible. And finally, if you can't use those, check the requirement for land bridge for transporting through Great Britain, and you can get information on that from revenue commissioners. And just a little thing on where you can get further information. Firstly, our own NSAI website has a Brexit report which contains a lot of information, including our updated fact sheet on construction products. As John said earlier, there is a Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage's FAQs, which you can get on that department's website. You can get some information from the National Building Control Office, and there's the website there. Ray will talk about a lot of the customs and other materials next, and there's the revenue website where you can get information. There's general Brexit information available from the Irish government website. You can also get information from the EU website, and there's the address there. And finally, if you're trading with the UK, it's always useful to check the UK government's website. I'll be happy to take questions later on any of this after Ray's presentation. Thank you.
Okay, Michael, thanks very much. Have you stopped sharing there? Some great info there, Michael, and indeed Sean and John. So we're on 20 to 12, so we're going to move swiftly on to Ray. Ray is from Revenue, and we'll go through, I suppose, that end of things.
Yeah, sorry, my own name is Ray Ryan, and I'm from Revenue's Brexit unit. So I'm just going to go briefly through some of the requirements from a customs point of view and the changes that happened since the 1st of January. So I think it's been mentioned already in terms of that transition period has ended. But the rest of the presentation will really focus on goods moving between GB and Ireland and GB. So the Ireland Northern Ireland Protocol, which has already been mentioned, basically means that there's no customs formalities between Ireland and Northern Ireland. So any goods coming into Ireland from Northern Ireland, there'll be no customs requirements. So it's just from Great Britain. So they're a third country for customs purposes. And what that means is there's customs declarations, customs formalities apply, and those customs declarations can also include interventions, both from a revenue point of view and from other agencies' point of view. So I'll just skip on to some of the requirements for importing, exporting, and transiting then. So just in terms of importing, so if you're bringing goods in from GB, you require an import declaration submitted to our AIS system. There's a lot of detail required in that. Aspects like commodity code, country of origin, the values, the weights, all those kind of aspects need to be included. So any invoices that you have, your commercial invoices, really should reflect what's included on a customs declaration. So even that's changes within some people's systems, their own accounting systems for creating invoices are being updated. We've got lots of queries in relation to the information that needs to be put on those invoices. So the invoices should match what's on the customs declaration, even in terms of the commodity codes and country of origin as well. Again, country of origin, I'll reference it in a while under the free trade agreement or the trade and cooperation agreement, that any goods coming from the UK that have UK origin are subject to a preferential rate, 0 rate. So I'll cover that more in detail, but again, it's an important aspect to consider around that commodity code and the duties that may apply if it's not a UK origin. So it's key to remember that. The next part of the process, bringing goods in, is an entry summary declaration. So this is actually a safety and security declaration, and it's submitted to a separate system. So you'll have 2 declarations. You'll have your import declaration and your entry summary declaration, both required before the goods leave GB. And for any goods that are moving on the Ro-Ro ferry services, you actually need both those MRNs, the master reference numbers, for those 2 declarations to be added into pre-boarding notification. So you can see already there's a number of different steps to be taken. You may not be responsible for all of them, but all of them need to be taken to actually allow your goods to move into Ireland from GB. So again, it's an awareness in your supply chain, who's responsible for each of those declarations, who's going to complete them. If one step is missing, the goods won't move. So it is an awareness around that. And a key thing around the next point in relation to the subject to intervention or license requirements, that commodity code again is key to it. So if you enter your commodity code, you can check if it's subject to any controls, subject to any license requirements. The last few presentations obviously outlined some of the requirements in terms of the CE markings and the different markings that will apply. There's also other requirements that may apply to products being brought in, and it's awareness around that. And again, checking that commodity code. If you're getting a commodity code from your supplier, ensure you're happy that it's correct. Don't assume it is correct. Because you as importer are ultimately responsible for the goods that are imported and the details that are included on the declaration. So again, it's an awareness around that. Other considerations then are around the payment of duties and VAT. I already referenced that goods being imported will be subject to customs duty and VAT at the point of importation. Duties will apply on goods coming from the UK if they have other origins. So if it's another third country, outside of the UK origin, they will be subject to customs duties. And also be aware that if goods are moving from the EU into the UK and cleared for free circulation in the UK, duties actually may apply on those EU goods coming into Ireland. So it's an awareness around that. There is potential for avoiding those duties, and I can cover it more later in the slides. In relation to VAT then, in normal circumstances, VAT is paid at the point of importation too. But since the 1st of January, postponed accounting can be availed of. So if you have a valid Irish LORI number, if you're the importer on the declaration and you have a valid Irish VAT number, you can actually avail of postponed accounting. Again, that actually needs to be claimed on a declaration. It's not automatically given, so you need to claim for it. So again, it's an awareness around the completion of that import declaration in AIS to ensure that the correct information is put in. Similarly, on the customs duty, if you're claiming that preferential duty, you actually need to claim it on the declaration. So again, it's an awareness around that, because we have had instances already where businesses weren't expecting duties to be charged, and they were charged because those claims for preferential duty or for the postponed accounting weren't included. And that meant the goods were sitting in the ports waiting for the payment of duties or waiting for the correction of the declaration to claim those preferences. So again, it's an awareness around who's completing the declarations, ensure they're putting in the correct information into it. In terms of exports then, again, it requires a customs declaration. This is submitted to AEP, which is a separate system to the ones previously mentioned. And this, for exports, it's slightly different, that the safety and security information can actually be included in the export declaration. So it's one declaration rather than the 2 that are required at import. Again, they may be subject to intervention or license requirements. At export, it will be a bit reduced, but again, it's an awareness around that. License requirements for chemicals and so forth would be an example. Again, if it's moving by ro-ro ferry service, that MRN for the export declaration needs to be added into the pre-boarding notification, and awareness around who is completing those declarations, sharing that data, sharing that MRN with whoever's completing the pre-boarding notification. Those steps need to be taken, or again, the vehicle won't be allowed aboard the ferry service leaving Ireland. And just an awareness around that the requirements. So it's a two-step process. So obviously you're exporting goods from Ireland. There's import formalities required in the UK. So it's deciding who's completing those import formalities, perhaps as part of your sales contract, perhaps as part of your contract already, that you are responsible for them. And it's an awareness around how you're going to do those. Have you access to the HMRC systems? Do you need separate numbers, separate details in relation to it? And it's, again, it's don't make an assumption that someone else is doing it. Ask the questions to ensure, obviously, that if you're exporting, your goods get to their final destination without any issues. Just in terms of moving goods through GB, so this is the transit procedure. So it allows goods move from Ireland through the UK onto the EU or vice versa. It requires a customs declaration again, which is called a transit declaration, and this is submitted to an NCTS system. So again, this is another system that you may need access to, or an agent that would need access to it. The difference for the transit declarations is that they require access to a financial guarantee. So that's the difference from the previous importing and exporting, that for transit, you actually need access to a financial guarantee. So it's very important to be aware of that. Again, they may be subject to intervention. And obviously, if it's a transit declaration, it's going to be using the ro-ro ferry services, so you will require those pre-boarding notifications. For export, again, that safety and security declaration will be included in the transit declaration more than likely. If not, you need a separate declaration. And then for import, the entry summary declaration will be required. So if a transit is raised in France, for example, you can move across out of the EU into the UK on that transit declaration. Prior to departure from the UK, it needs that entry summary declaration. So again, you need that entry summary declaration, MRN, plus your transit MRN added onto the pre-boarding notification. So again, it's an awareness around those steps. And just in terms of using the land bridge, you need to be aware of, there's also requirements within the UK for moving goods. So they have a DVMS system. They also have the Kent Access Pass. From the 1st of April, I think, there's exit summary declarations are required leaving the UK. There's also pre-boarding notifications required going into the other EU member states. And there's also the entry summary declaration required again going into other EU member states. So it's an awareness around the full remit of requirements throughout the supply chain that are needed to move the goods from using the land bridge. And again, as Michael mentioned, the use of the direct routes avoids the need for any of these transit declarations or customs declarations. If you can move your goods to or from the EU directly into using the direct services, you don't need to complete any customs declarations. And again, it's a discussion maybe with our logistics partners, how they're moving the goods. We have seen a significant reduction on the use of the land bridge, but again, that's down to other factors, including the restrictions in lockdowns throughout the EU. So again, the land bridge may pick up in the next few months as trade opens up. But again, it's an awareness around how your goods are moving and the impact it will have in terms of the administration requirements around those customs declarations and requirements moving through the land bridge. So just to give you some detail in terms of the learnings from the first month, we had issues, I suppose, initially in terms of incorrect data being entered on the declarations, which caused declarations to be held. Documentation wasn't present with the declarations, that type of information. So again, it's all going back to the correct detail needs to be added into your declarations. On the entry summary declaration side, there was actually a lack of awareness in a lot of cases that was required. And then also incorrect details were included in an entry summary declaration, which was causing the declarations to, again, not be allowed to move from either the GB or having issues when it arrived in Ireland. So again, it's awareness around that. There is a temporary easement in place on the entry summary declarations. So if you are experiencing issues with your entry summary declarations or someone moving the goods on your behalf, they can contact Revenue. The contact details are on the end of the slide in terms of accessing that easement, and the e-customs notification is available there. Again, an awareness around the documentation not sent to the relevant agencies in advance. This is more around agri-food products, so maybe not relevant for this, so I won't go into too much. But again, it's the awareness around having that documentation present. There was a lot of references to the different types of documentation that's required from a certification point of view. So again, an awareness around that. If your products are stopped, have you easy access to the documentation? Can you share them easily into Revenue systems? Can you send them electronically? Again, Revenue are operating 24/7. The sailings are happening 24/7, in particular at ro-ro, and stops can happen on a 24/7 basis. So if your goods are stopped for a documentary check, have you or your agent access to the systems on a 24/7 basis, or can you send them in advance to avoid any issues if there is documents required? That insufficient funds I mentioned is becoming an issue, and again, it's usually linked back to either an awareness or lack of an awareness that customs duty may apply to goods coming from GB. Obviously, if they don't have UK origin, duties may apply, and then the postponed accounting that actually wasn't being selected on each declaration. So again, it needs to be requested on each declaration. So again, an awareness around that. Michael referenced groupage. So a good example recently was a groupage load that had 6 declarants on it, and 5 of those declarants had everything done correctly. One was incorrect, as in they had insufficient funds, they weren't expecting a charge, but it actually delayed the full load. So again, it's an awareness around that if you are using groupage, issues can impact and can delay you. So where possible, try and have full loads. If not, be aware and be in constant contact with your logistics supplier to have an awareness around what other goods are moving on board that vehicle. Just in terms of some queries that also came in the first month around the construction. So both ways, either engineers, electricians, any people that are moving to or from sites into Ireland or out of Ireland with their equipment and tools. Those equipment and tools actually need customs declarations. There's customs formalities required at export from Ireland, import into the UK, then obviously exporting back from the UK and re-import into Ireland. So again, it's an awareness around that, doing correctly to avoid any payment of duties and the reliefs that are available, and ensure that you're aware of what steps can be taken and have it done in advance. There's also an option outside of the customs declarations that I mentioned. There's the ATA cardies that can apply to equipment. So again, contact Dublin Chamber of Commerce in relation to that and what options are available there. So again, it's an awareness around that. It's not just big loads and full loads, it's also equipment and tools that are moving over and back that do require customs formalities. Another issue in terms of construction would be steel imports, and there is a quota required on that. So again, you need to claim a quota to avoid a 25% charge. So again, awareness of how to do that. There's going to be a notification issuing this week from Revenue, just in terms of how to deal with that, because you can't actually claim a quota for a pre-lodge declaration, which is what is required currently. So there is going to be a solution put in place for that, and hopefully that will issue in the coming week. And I'll share it through this group as well, so we can share to the people on this call as well. And just in terms of exports from Ireland to GB in Northern Ireland, there's a notification there on how that applies. So obviously, goods do move via Northern Ireland, either from UK into Northern Ireland and onwards to Ireland. So there's options available there. And again, an export and how to actually close the exports. And there's details on the e-customs notification. So just in terms of the origin, again, it's just a reminder that the zero tariff only applies to goods of UK origin when you're importing them. You need to have a statement of origin from the company or the supplier coming from, or you need to have relevant documentation to prove that origin, that it is UK origin. There is details there in that e-customs notification on how to claim it. Again, you need to claim that declaration or claim that preferential duty. If you enter the details on the declaration that just says UK origin on the commodity code, it will charge you duties where applicable, but you need to claim the preferential code as well. So it's important to remember that. And then another aspect is if the goods are not of UK origin, so they're either EU or other third country, there's a number of different ways that this can operate. So if a UK company is importing something from the USA, for example, they're going to be charged customs duties on those goods coming into the UK. If it then moves on to Ireland, those goods still have the UK or the US origin. So again, there could be customs duties applying here. So if that first point of importation into the UK has a customs warehousing, they can actually suspend the payment of duties. So then it avoids double duties, that there's still obviously duties applying coming into Ireland, but that at least there is not that additional charge of those duties. So it's an awareness around that. The temporary storage facilities are linked into transit movements. So if you're moving goods from the EU into the UK, you can move it for a transit on a transit. Again, it retains that EU status. It obviously doesn't lose its UK origin or EU origin unless it's been further worked. And then you can do another transit from the UK into Ireland. So again, it's awareness around different methods that can do it. Obviously, there's some goods that are already in the UK that have EU origin and can't avail of some of those procedures. So there is options for return goods relief. So if you're re-importing goods that left the EU and are coming back into the EU, there is a potential to apply for return goods relief. But there's a lot of requirements and documentation around that. And again, there's further guidance in relation to that on the e-customs notification 14/2021. So again, there's a lot of information in those notifications. They are useful to read through, to assess, and there is contact details on those notifications too. And just, I suppose, a reminder as such that at exports that there is a phased approach within the UK, and customs import declarations will be required in full from the 1st of July 2021. So if you are exporting, you may not have noticed much importing requirements at the moment, but they will be in place for the 1st of July 2021. So again, it's an awareness around that and the impact it will have, and the readiness steps that you may need to take in terms of getting those goods moved. From April 2021, there is requirements around products of animal origin, but I suppose for this presentation, it's not really relevant. And here are just some of the contact points. So again, I mentioned that entry summary declaration, that there is a temporary easement. You can contact that unit in relation to availing of it if you're having issues with your entry summary declarations. If you have any issues submitting declarations, you can contact the e-Customs help desk on that email address, or Monday to Friday 9 to 5 on that number. Again, that pre-boarding notification, if you're having issues with that, there's a direct contact for the pre-boarding notification team. And then my own team deals with Brexit queries, so brexitqueries@revenue.ie. The last number then is actually a 24/7 line. So if you already have goods moving, maybe have issues with it, maybe documentary checks you want to check, you can actually contact that number and you can get through to the relevant port or airport in relation to moving your goods through. So just a very quick run through the requirements from a customs point of view. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Ray. And indeed to all our panelists, there's some phenomenal information there, a lot of detail, and I have to tell you, we've got more questions than I've ever had at any of the webinars. So thanks everybody for contributing. We'll do our best. We're going to try and group some of them as well to get through these, but I will give you some detail after as well. So look, I'm going to fire away, guys. Overwhelmed, I must say, by the amount of questions. So there were a few that came in as well before this started. So the first one might sound like a simple one. I'm going to throw it to you, John, and it's just, how do I check which products are covered by harmonized standards after Brexit? I can get you to unmute there.
And thanks everyone for questions. Well, I suppose with respect to products which are covered by a harmonized standard under the CPR, one should make a reference to the CPR NANDO database. It lists all the standards that are covered within the scope of the CPR. So that would be your first port of call. I think our FAQs do deal with being able to identify the various actors that were involved in the standard that was associated with the particular marking as well. If people want to refer to the FAQs, there's some graphics there to illustrate how to access that NANDO database, and that should provide some help in that regard.
Okay, thanks, John. I have another one here then. Does every construction product have to be CE marked? Maybe Sean or John might be able to take that as well. And just, yeah, you take yourself off mute there as well, Michael, you might need to.
Yeah, I can answer that. Every construction product can't be CE marked. I gave an example there of some of them that can't, like steel reinforcement or ready mixed concrete. So it's not possible. Only those that fall under the harmonized standards can be CE marked. Just there was a couple of questions coming in about testing in the UK. I said for AVC System 3, the notified test laboratories over in the UK can no longer test products for systems for purpose of CE marking, and that is the case. However, it's not the case that we wouldn't recognize testing. This is only for the purposes of CE marking. I showed a lot of other quality marks that come from the UK that are operated by companies over there, and they carry out testing. There's nothing to suggest that the UK test for any other purpose other than CE marking is no longer relevant. That's not the case. Products will still be tested in the UK for other purposes other than CE marking, like for those quality schemes, or indeed some of the things that we do here in NSAI. And also with British standards, they are cited in the building regulations. If they're not cited in the building regs and the product is not CE marked, well then of course it provides informative data about the performance of the product, and it can be relied upon, as we did last year, I suppose.
Okay, all right, thanks for that, Sean. Then I had another one that came in. The product was certified by a UK notified body in December. It was placed on the market by a UK distributor in December. And if I buy that product now from the UK, from that same distributor, does it have to be recertified? Michael, you might take that one for us.
I can take that. There was transition provisions put in place whereby any product that was legally placed on the EU market, including the UK, prior to the 31st of December, can continue to be can continue legally to its end user elsewhere within the EU. So for instance, if a door was legally placed on the market in the UK on the 20th of December, and then that was subsequently bought by an Irish company and shipped over here, well, that CE certification is still valid over here. However, be aware that you may be subject now to customs and other constraints, but in terms of the declaration of performance and the CE marking, that will still be valid.
Okay, thank you, Michael. And then there's one more general, it's probably really for everyone. So following the Brexit agreement, is the position in relation to CE marking, does it still mean that UK manufacturers must move their testing facility to a European house, or must it be affiliated with an EU 27 testing facility? Is that clear?
Well, I gave the answer to that. For the purpose of type testing for AVCP 3, it must be done by an EU 27 country. And I think the reason for that is because the UK one is sort of outside the legal reach of the EU now. So for the purpose of CE marking only, it must be a test house located, a notified test body located in the EU 27.
Okay, and Sean, as you mentioned, AVCP, there is a, sorry, Michael, yeah.
I can just expand on what John's saying there. As a general rule, anything where EU regulation 765 of 2008 applies in CE marking, that has to be done within the EU. If that regulation doesn't apply, well, then you're generally, as a broad rule, okay using UK accredited laboratories. And that applies not just to construction products, but to any product where there's EU product legislation.
Okay. Okay, well, look, I'm going to just move on to the chat. I'm very conscious there's a lot of questions that's still coming in. So I'm going to start with the very first one we got, to be fair, from Tim. Thanks, Tim. So he's asking if a new product is developed today in the UK, similar to one we currently supply. He's saying, does this require licensing / approval to supply to the Irish market? So if a new product is developed today in the UK, does it require licensing? Michael, maybe you could take it. Yeah.
I think as a general rule, if the product is required to be under CE marking, it will need to be CE marked and go through all that full process to be legally placed on the market. There's no separate licensing or anything like that. Once it meets those requirements, you can place it on the EU market, and that would apply to any product developed in any third country. So it's just not necessarily the UK. If the construction product regulation required to be CE marked, and you need to meet those requirements and use the appropriate harmonized standards and all. And once that's done, there's no separate licensing to place on the market under CPR.
Okay. Okay. Another question there from June Ann. Cube testing certification through UKCA. What testing is acceptable now? So again, maybe would that be a question for you, Sean? I'm not sure.
Yeah, presumably cubes testing is done for the purpose of quality control on site, or they're testing cubes from ready mixed concrete that was ordered. So yes, they can be tested in a UK laboratory. It's not for the purpose of CE marking.
Okay, so if goods are taken into Northern Ireland from the UK tariff-free, can they then be supplied to the Republic of Ireland tariff-free, even if they have come direct from GB to the Republic? Are they liable for tariffs, essentially?
Yeah, I can cover that.
Yeah, thank you.
What happens is, if anything coming from GB to Ireland or GB to Northern Ireland is treated the same. So there's import formalities in Northern Ireland HMRC systems. So if there's duties applying in goods coming into Ireland, they will actually apply coming into Northern Ireland too. So again, it's the declarations are completed in Northern Ireland. So if you're buying products from a Northern Irish company that are coming from GB or US or wherever, they would have completed import declarations. So again, that's the Northern Ireland Protocol covers the fact that you don't need to do any further customs declarations. They've already been completed in Northern Ireland. What is happening is that there is a TSS system in Northern Ireland. It's the system, and the first stage is you just do a customs information, and then a few weeks later, the payment of duties and VAT apply. So that may be where the issue is, where it may appear there's no duties being applied and the goods already arrived in Ireland, but there is a backdating as such that the second stage will update Northern Irish business to pay duties and VAT as they apply.
Okay. Thanks, Ray. Richard has a question. He's kind of asking, where can we find a list of construction products which must be independently certified by notifying bodies. I'm conscious I'm probably going over some old territory, but is such a list exist somewhere, lads?
Well, the list of harmonized standards is available on the NANDO website, so you need to consult that and see if these products fall under one of the harmonized standards and what AVCP it falls under.
Okay.
If it's under a system 4, you won't find any test results, but it's 1, 2, and 3. There you'll see what information is required, if you like.
Okay. So there were quite a lot of questions about the UKCA certification. I think people weren't really 100% clear. Maybe, Michael, if you could give an example of a certification and what the change is now, I suppose, in the last 6 weeks, it might cover a couple of questions there. You're just on mute there, Michael. If you just unmute yourself. Yeah.
The change will really come on the 1st of January next year. What it will be is that if you currently have to get your product CE marked and to use an EU notified body for third-party certification, if you want to place that product on the UK market 1st of January next year, you will be required to use UK designated standards, to have third-party testing carried out by a UK approved body, and to produce a UK declaration of performance and put on the UKCA mark. I'm just going to use this opportunity to address another question which is related, is can you both CE mark and UKCA mark the same product at the same time? And the answer to that is, if the product meets both the EU essential requirements and the UK essential requirements, and you use an EU notified body and for CE marking it, and you use a UK approved body for UKCA marking it, and you have an EU declaration performance and a UK declaration performance, the product can have both marks on it. So you can, in theory, go and get your product both tested and certified in the UK and in the EU, so that it can be placed on both markets.
Okay. I have one here. What's the status of British standards that are not referenced in technical guidance documents? What is the status? Anyone, that one?
I suppose, all standards are generally voluntary. The standards that are mandatory under marketing rules are those that are harmonized. So standards will continue to exist, and if they're not referenced in any context to building regulations, maybe they have a context in some other sector, but they continue to be, I suppose, valid reference points, and don't detract anything Brexit related to them. They're in a non-harmonized sector, I would imagine now.
Okay, so that might be good news for that person. So do I need a declaration of performance and a declaration of conformity for construction products that fall under the CPR? That's from Bobby. That's to everyone, I suppose, essentially.
I think the simple thing is that the declaration of conformity and the declaration of performance are effectively the same thing. The construction products regulation call it a declaration of performance, whereas for other EU product legislation, such as the Radio Equipment Directive, the EMC Directive, the Toys Directive, a similar document is called a declaration of conformity. So if it's a construction product, you have a declaration of performance. If it's not a construction product, you have a declaration of conformity, and they effectively have the same role.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Mauricio is asking, just maybe for somebody or even all of you to make comment on the resolution from the EA. It's a very long question there, so I'm presuming the EA resolution 2020, and that's the General Assembly acknowledges that the UK left the EU. Anything worth mentioning there, or is it?
I would suggest that this is really a question that needs to be addressed to INAB. NSAI is not a member of EA, it's INAB who are the member of EA, and they really need to talk to INAB about that. So we wouldn't be in a position to comment in any detail on it.
Okay. Somebody has a question. Risk mitigation plans, impacts envisaged in potential future business. So risk mitigation plans, that's from Philip. There's not any more detail there. If you want to, can we address that, or do we need more detail here?
I think you need more detail. I don't know what the question means, to be honest.
Okay. Okay.
Just
so
from a
Philip, you
customs
might-
point of view, what it could be is relating to the goods, EU goods that are moving through the UK, that customs warehousing that I mentioned, that type of thing. So if you're trying to avoid the payment of duties on EU goods coming in through the UK,
Yeah.
assess your supply chains and ensure they have the customs warehousing in place. That's a risk mitigation strategy as such.
Okay.
Just also on it from, I suppose, now that I think of it from a technical perspective, under the CPR, the offence is committed if a manufacturer places the product on the market without placing the CE mark on the product. That's the offence. It's not an offence, say, for a specifier to use a product in a building if it had been wrongly CE marked, for instance. So if the concern is that they may end up using a product that wasn't properly marked, there's no offence in using it. It's then down to the specifier to determine whether that product is fit for purpose and for the conditions which it's going to be used. That may be the risk analysis that the questioner is referring to there. I don't know.
Okay, thank you. There's another one from Michael, just in relation to tariffs. Can you advise if tariffs are now applicable on construction products coming from the UK? I think we actually covered that. He says, we're in the process of buying ductile iron pipe from a manufacturer in the UK who imported it from India in 2020, and we're being told a tariff of 12.5 or 12.2% now applies.
Yeah, that's kind of the example I was given, that if it's coming into the UK, it's already been imported, or even if it's imported from the 1st of January, they may be importing it to free circulation, have already paid duties, but when it's imported to Ireland again, there will be duties applying because the country of origin hasn't changed. I presume there's no processing done to that product within the UK to make it a UK origin. So once it's retained the Indian origin, customs duties will apply.
Okay, thanks, Ray. The UKCA mark on the product, does it look the same as the CE mark? I think it doesn't. I think you cover that, Michael, including symbols, the DOP, etc.
Yeah, if you look at my presentation, the symbol that says UKCA, that is actually the mark how it looks. And I think I had that in his presentation as well. So when you talk to the presentations tomorrow, you'll be able to see what it looks like.
Exactly. Yeah. Okay. Let me have a look down. Just flicking through a few because there are some similar ones. Can you clarify if products with UKCA certification are acceptable to specify on Irish products?
The answer again is not for the purposes of CE marking. If an end user, if the product doesn't need to be CE marked, or if there's additional characteristics of the product that were established through a UKCA laboratory, that's fine, but not for the purpose of CE marking.
Okay, there's one there on AVCP System 3, but I think you answered that earlier, Sean, so we're going to move on from there. How essential is the importer's details being on the product? Would this stop it being imported rather? So that's probably a Ray question, I believe. So the importer's details being on the product, does it stop it being imported?
From a customs point of view, you wouldn't be able to know from a declaration if it wasn't on it or not. That's the way I'll put it. But if it's stopped for any documentary checks or any other checks and it's not on it, then it will cause issues. So again, it's an awareness around the requirements that are within the different legislations. If it should be placed on it and it's stopped at a point of importation, then the goods could be held until it's clarified and rectified and potentially retained.
Okay.
Just to add that it would be a form of non-compliance under the CPR not to have their details noted on the product or the documentation.
Yeah, so essentially it is a problem for them if it's not filled out in its entirety. Okay. If there's a product on the market where no EN standard exists, can it be specified? Should it still carry a CE mark?
Well, it can't carry the CE mark. It's unlikely it will carry the CE mark. There is a route to having those products CE marked, but it's not a mandatory route. If they go down and have a European technical assessment, but let's assume that this product doesn't and there's no harmonized standard in place, well, then it cannot be CE marked. So it is okay to use it as long as the end user is satisfied that it's fit for purpose and the conditions in which it is going to be used.
Okay. No, Mark has more of a comment, I think, than a question, but he's saying so far Northern Ireland manufacturers benefiting from unfettered access into GP hasn't been covered. Maybe it was later on at some stage. Northern Ireland manufacturers benefiting from unfettered access into GP hasn't been covered. Any comments to make there, or?
Just from a customs point of view, there is customs declarations at export required. So there is that TSS system is used by Northern Irish businesses, but it is a customs formalities, and then there's requirements on the other side. And even if stuff is coming in Northern Ireland through Dublin Port, which is a route into the UK, that there is customs declarations required there. So there is an awareness around that, and then businesses are doing those declarations.
And Ray, I have another one there for you. How do revenues see the temporary importation and return to the UK of some temporary higher concrete inspection equipment? How do you see the temporary importation UK?
Yeah, that's actually probably, I didn't probably reference actually the example I gave was the tools in the van and the equipment in the van. The same applies for higher machinery, big machines. If they're going out for a particular project or coming in, obviously there's customs declarations required. So if it's going into the UK, it's temporary export from Ireland. You need to complete either temporary admission in the UK. Again, it's an awareness around who's actually going to do that. Is it your responsibility because it's your machine, or is it the particular project lead or whoever's going to do it over there, ensuring that you know, because if you don't do it correctly, it could be subject to customs duties and VAT in the UK. Then obviously when it's returning, there's an export declaration required from the UK and a re-import in Ireland. And again, it needs particular codes on it to avoid the payment of duty. So there's a relief for return goods again, and that would obviously qualify there because you have the proof of export declaration. You just reference the export declaration on the re-import, and that would avoid any payment of duties there. But again, it's a customs procedure to and flow. So again, that happens regularly. Obviously, some projects are short term, some are long term. So again, if it's part of your processing, frequent process or frequent business models, definitely look into who's going to do it for you, who's going to complete those declarations, and have it as streamlined as possible. Actually, just on the an aspect of that which was mentioned earlier on the testing and calibration, it's similar enough that there's customs declarations required. There's an outward processing authorization that can be done if it's being calibrated or basically if it's being processed in any way, and that's something to look into again. So it's an outward processing authorization, and I can send on links afterwards if you want, just to share them with the people on the call. It's again, it's another procedure. It's customs declarations required outbound, and needs particular requirements on the UK side again. And then when it's coming back in, you need to do the re-import under our processing. So again, there's different steps involved. It's customs procedures and customs formalities put down on those movements.
Okay. I have another one here. Now, bear with me, it's a little bit long, so I'll try and take it nice and slowly. Paul says he works in OPW Architectural Services. He says they have a plethora of projects on site and the same issues are coming out on each, i.e. technical submittals for products the contractor wants to swap for items we specified. The most confusing and worrying of these are fire-related products where Warrington fire reports are given based on tests in the mainland UK. Am I right in assuming that if the dates of the tests are prior to Brexit, then the standards given are acceptable?
Well,
from specific fire products, Sean,
yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's related to CE marking or not. Warrington fire tests, if they're carried out to an EN standard, that's the fire test standard, EN 16, whatever it is. It's not a harmonized standard, but if they are carried out, yes, we'd accept them. If it's been carried out for the purposes of CE marking, it's unacceptable. But if it's a fire test carried out to establish how a wall behaves or something, and it's been carried out per the European standard, well then yes, it's up to the science certifier ultimately, but nothing has changed from a legal perspective in that regard.
Okay. Now he doesn't actually specify that. So if you want to maybe send in a follow-up, Paul, we'll follow that up with you. Okay. Bear with me there. There are tons and tons of questions, and I am apologizing if there is some repetition here. I suppose the expertise lies with you guys. So I think I have another question for you, Ray, if you don't mind. How is VAT treated on delivery of digital services from the UK, e.g. online training to organisations or individuals in Ireland or the EU?
The UK, or sorry, the TCA only covers goods as such, so there's no agreement on services. So services in the UK, including Northern Ireland, is treated the same as if it was a US service provider. So I think it's depending on the supply of services, where it's actually supplied, and VAT applies either UK VAT or Irish VAT, depending on where that service is provided. So again, it's just an awareness around how that will impact on your invoices. And remember that Northern Ireland is included for the UK for that purposes.
Okay. Okay. No. Sorry, one moment. There are some very, very long questions, folks, so we're not going to get through all of those, but we will try and address them. I'm going to give you some email addresses afterwards, and we will get to those for you. There is a question on CE marking for the Department of Housing, so that's you, John. If a product falls under one of the 447 harmonized standards and gets presented to designers and certifiers with a CE attested by a UK notified body, it has been placed on the market illegally. Would this impact the ability of a designer or certifier to accept that a product is fit for purpose and that they have exercised skill, care, and due diligence?
Okay, so just a couple of things I'm just reading from that would be that, first of all, the correspondent there has identified that it has been illegally placed on the market. And I think there's an overall responsibility to bring that to the attention of the National Building Control Office, support at nbco.gov.ie. As I had presented in my slides, there is a fundamental difference between the rules of placing on the market and the rules to using such products in buildings and for compliance with building regulations. It's really, I suppose, important that the certifier ensures that the product is fit for the use for its intended and the conditions in which it's to be used. And for example, I suppose, that could signal to me that not all of the competencies involved in the manufacture, the factory production control of that product had been in place that would be equivalent to a legitimately marketed product. So it's really important that that the reliance on the certification is one that comes from a legitimate source to enable certifiers to sign off on buildings. But I do have to admit they are two separate pieces of legislation, and it is the burden of proof resides with designers, builders, owners of buildings to ensure compliance with the building regulations.
Okay. Thanks for that, John. It was kind of a lot of detail there. So I have another question from David. It's a question on statement of origin. Ray mentioned it is not enough to just state the country of origin on the customs paperwork, that a code is required. What code is this exactly?
Yeah, so if you enter a customs declaration with UK origin on the declaration, you actually need to put in a preference code. So it's preference code 300 in a particular field. It's that element 417. That AP notification or e-customs notification does outline the full details, but you also need to put in there's statement of origins required either from the supplier or if you're doing it on your importer's knowledge. So you need to actually put in reference codes to those too. So if you're using it on the statement of origin, it's a U116. If it's importer knowledge, it's U117, and you need to have documentation to back that up in terms of if it's based on importer's knowledge. So you're saying it is UK origin, you need to back it up with relevant documentation. And those need to be held for 4 years afterwards. So again, it's an awareness around if you are claiming the preferential duty, you need to have the documentation to back it up and awareness around what's required. So it's important to remember that claiming that preferential duty can be done through the system, but then you do need the documentation if it's either stopped at the point of importation to validate it or potentially in a follow-up audit down the line.
Okay. There are a few questions actually, Sean, they're coming in just in relation to the CPR systems 1, 2, 3, 4. So I do have a question here. It might cover some of those answers. So it actually came in a little bit earlier. It relates to the level of scrutiny the designers, contractors, and project certifiers take on the CPR. So how the assessment and verification tasks associated with System 1 and 1+ are more onerous than systems 2+ and 3, with no scrutiny needed for 4, as it does not involve notified bodies. You might just, I think there's some confusion between system and system 1. You maybe just take us through that if you don't mind, Sean.
Yeah, those systems are in place for the purposes of placing the product on the market. It's not a quality control system. None of them are. Like the minimum amount of information any manufacturer, say, would need to give on a particular product. A harmonized standard identifies a number of essential characteristics. They only need to declare on the any one characteristic. So that's an example of the small amount of information that may be required to be communicated in order to place your product legally on the market. For assigned certifiers or specifiers or whatever who are receiving products, they should establish their own quality control procedures. Like it's normal quality control procedures for receiving goods into a factory or onto a site or whatever. You would maybe carry out periodic testing or whatever to establish that the goods are sufficient for what you want them to do. But it wouldn't necessarily be the right thing to rely on. You can rely on the CE marking. The information is given on CE marking, but I don't think it would exonerate you from other responsibilities to ensure that you're constantly getting goods of a certain standard on site, because mistakes can happen and products can find their way onto the market that necessarily that may be issues with them.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I know there's a lot to cover there, so thanks for.
Could I just add just to that, like at the end of the day, irrespective of AVCP system, the specifier or the certifier, builder, etc., has a responsibility to comply with the building regulations. And in the slide that I did have up about placing products on the market, equally that would, the same kind of system applies to if it's a CE mark product under another harmonized piece of legislation, or even a non-harmonized standard. The responsibility for the builder assigned certifier to demonstrate compliance with the building regulations and making sure that that product is fit for purpose is the most important thing.
Okay. There isn't just on the CPR, there's Daniel has a question there. Do we know what changes may be coming as a result of the review of the CPR? That might be another one for you, John.
Yeah, the Commission have published some documentation, and they've consulted widely with stakeholders. There's a page on the Commission's website on the review of the CPR, and you'll be able to refer to some of the potential areas that they are considering refinement, such as strengthening market surveillance, reducing burden on SMEs, to give more credibility to harmonized standards and to remove conflict with other pieces of EU legislation. So those are generally some of the identified areas where the Commission are proposing to tackle, and they inform us that there will be some white smoke at some point this year. Okay.
So watch that space. Where can people, so is it best to go to your website, John, for that kind of information on the CPR? Or?
The Commission have their own website on the review of the CPR, and it outlines all of the stakeholder consultations that they've conducted so far. So I think that's the primary source of reference. We do host a CPR page on the department's website, which provides links in turn then to the Commission's website. So I suppose from a localized perspective, if you go onto the department's website, look up the information that's made available on CPR, it'll bring you to the Commission's website as well.
Okay, thanks, John. I'm just conscious of the time. We don't have much time left, folks. We'll try and squeeze a few in. We have another one on System 4 and System 2+, so it might be back to you, Sean. A UK brick manufacturer has advised that they can offer their product to the EU as System 4, so self-declaration, rather than System 2+. Would this be permissible?
Yeah, I saw that there. Yeah, yes, it is permissible. They can offer to System 4 rather than System 2+, but they should also be aware that Irish building regulations, when you're constructing a building with masonry units, the Irish building regulation itself will require that they declare under 2+. So you can import those, but you may well be only garden walls or something you can build using them. So.
Okay. Now, look, I know it's impossible, to be honest, to get through everything that's come through. So I'm going to maybe finish up with 2 to 3 questions, if that's okay. We're practically at 12:30 here, so let me have a quick look. Some of the ones just come in. How much processing is required to change third-party country of origin to make the product of UK country of origin? So how much processing is required to change third-party country of origin?
It actually depends on the type of product. So for example, vehicles can be up to over 50% processing required, and then some food products are down to 10-15%. So it just depends on the type of products. If they want to send an email to Brexit Queries, if it's a particular product that they want to check. And again, it's our origin team, we can send it to Brexit Queries at revenue.ie. That's on the slide deck there, and we'll forward that to the relevant team.
Okay. James has one in here. He says, hiya, at the risk of sounding inflammatory, what's the purpose of the CE, etc., if the designer AC/DC needs to check the integrity of the products? So what's the purpose of the CE?
I think that the simple ruling on this is the CE mark allows you to place a product legally on the market. The building regulations, or for wiring, the wiring regulations tell you what products you must use in what situations. So you can place a product legally on the market, but if you may not use an inappropriate product in the wrong places. It's a key thing on that one. One's about placing on the market, and then the other regulations are about how you use a product and how it's the appropriate product for the job it's meant to do.
Okay.
Yeah, the CPR is introduced to eliminate technical barriers to trade, and that's to facilitate manufacturers to trade their products across the EU. It's not there to assist designers and specifiers or assign certifiers. That's not its primary function. Its primary function is to eliminate technical barriers to trade.
Okay.
The just other thing that just add to that is CE marking on the construction products is just fundamentally different than any of the other harmonised CE marking pieces of legislation where the CE marking under lifts directive, etc., would say that the product is safe. CE mark products under construction products regulations would say that a declaration of performance exists. We're not telling you whether it's safe or unsafe or what its performance is, good or bad. It's up to the end user to decide whether that product is fit for its intended use.
Okay.
That's the communication between the marketplace and the end user.
Okay. Well, John, I think that probably sounds like a good place to finish up. Thank you very much to all our panelists today for sharing your knowledge with us. There's so much to discuss, and thanks also to everybody who put in questions in the chat. I do apologize that we didn't get to all of them. If there is something in particular you really want answered, if you could email us maybe at brexitunit@nsai.ie. Now, if we can't answer that, we will refer to either our panelists or, as you mentioned earlier, sometimes it could be INAB, but we will do our best to try to answer those questions for you. So that's really it. Obviously, we have construction fact sheets and all of that kind of stuff, but it's in the presentations, so you will get all those details. Thank you everybody for being with us. We had, I think we had around 560 people here this morning. So really that's fantastic to know. I suppose there's so much interest, but also obviously a lot of people are having some issues too. And I hope we managed to cover some of those this morning. So to Ray, Sean, Michael and John, thanks a million for being with us this morning. And we'll probably do it all again soon.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Folks. All the best. Bye-bye.